You ever have one of those nights where you're doing the math in your head? Not even big dramatic math, just the quiet kind. Rent's due in a week. Groceries are somehow $40 for a few things. Your car makes a noise you're pretending not to hear, and you're laying there thinking, I make decent money, so why does it still feel like one wrong email could ruin my month? And the weird part is, you're not even necessarily broke. You're just not secure. Not the numbers on paper version of secure, but the nervous system version. The version where you can breathe when something unexpected happens. Where you don't flinch when your phone buzzes and it might be your bank app. If that's you, I want you to know something right up front. You're not failing at money. Most people are just looking for security in the wrong place. Because the truth is, the thing that decides whether you ever feel secure with money usually isn't your income. It's your quiet habits, the small behaviors no one claps for. The ones that happen in 5 minutes on a Tuesday, the ones that don't look like financial success, but quietly determine whether your future self lives in peace or in constant low-grade panic. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. Here's the problem with how most people think about financial security. We think it's an amount, a milestone, a finish line. I'll feel secure when I hit $10,000 saved, or when I finally make 6 figures, or when my debt is gone. And yes, those things help. Of course they do. But the reason so many people hit those milestones and still feel uneasy is because security isn't just a financial state. It's a relationship, a pattern, a sense that you can trust yourself with money, even under stress. And most of us never learned how to build that trust. We learned how to chase the next raise, or how to feel guilty about spending, or how to be good for 2 weeks and then snap and order takeout like it's an act of rebellion. We learned extremes. But security is built in the middle. In the boring middle. And I think that's why so many people misunderstand it. Because the habits that create long-term stability don't look impressive in the moment. They look almost too small to matter. Like moving money into savings the day you get paid. Like checking your bank account even when you don't want to. Like deciding in advance what enough looks like before lifestyle inflation decides for you. That's the stuff. And if you've struggled with this, I'm not going to blame you. Because money decisions aren't made in a vacuum. They're made while you're tired, while you're worried about work, while someone in your family needs something, while your brain is already overloaded. There's a concept in psychology and behavioral economics called scarcity, and basically it explains that when you feel like you don't have enough time, enough money, enough bandwidth, it changes how you think. It narrows your focus and pulls you toward immediate relief, even if long-term you pay for it. So if you've ever made a money decision that didn't make sense later, it probably made perfect sense to the version of you that was just trying to get through the day. That's not a character flaw, that's being human. But here's the good news. If insecurity is built by 1,000 tiny stress decisions, security is built the same way. When people think income is the main driver of security, they're half right. Income matters, it gives you options and creates margin. But income doesn't automatically create stability. Because if your habits don't create a buffer, money just becomes something that flows through you faster. It's like trying to feel safe in a house with no locks by just bringing in nicer furniture. It looks better, but it doesn't feel better. And you can see this in real life. You'll meet people making $45,000 who have a small emergency fund, no missed bills, and this steady, calm energy. And you'll meet people making $150,000 who are constantly behind, constantly stressed, constantly one mistake away from a mess they can't emotionally handle. What's the difference? It's not intelligence. It's not discipline in the dramatic sense. It's a handful of quiet habits that create friction in the right places and remove friction where it counts. Because your brain is always taking the easiest path. Always. That's why behavioral researchers talk so much about defaults and automation. When something is the default, people stick with it not because they are lazy, but because life is heavy. That one idea alone explains so much of personal finance. If the default is that your money sits in checking, it will get spent. If the default is that saving happens automatically, you'll build stability without needing a heroic personality. The first quiet habit is paying your future self first, but in a way that you barely notice. Not the I'll save whatever's left over method, because whatever's left over is usually stress. The quiet habit is this. The day you get paid, money leaves your checking account on purpose. Some goes to bills, some goes to savings, some goes to investing. If you're there yet, and what stays is what you can actually live on. That might sound basic, but it's psychological. Because your checking account is your emotional spending environment. It's where impulsive decisions happen, where I deserve this lives, where I can't deal with cooking tonight lives. When your savings sits in the same place as your spending, you're asking your stressed out brain to make perfect choices every day, and that's not fair to you. So people who feel secure tend to separate money on purpose, not because they're organized geniuses, but because they're tired and they design their life accordingly. This is also where mental accounting comes in, another concept from behavioral economics. We naturally assign money to different buckets in our mind, and we treat those buckets differently. So instead of fighting that, secure people use it. They make the emergency fund bucket feel emotionally different from the Saturday night bucket. Even if it's the same dollars, they don't feel the same. The second quiet habit is the one nobody wants to talk about, because it's not fun. It's doing small, regular check-ins with your money before it becomes an emergency. Not obsessive tracking. Not living inside spreadsheets. I mean a simple weekly glance. A 10-minute moment where you look at your accounts and ask, what did I spend? What's coming up? Do I need to adjust anything before it turns into a problem? Because here's what most people do. They avoid looking until it hurts. And I get it. Looking can trigger shame. It can trigger that sinking feeling like, why can't I get it together? But avoidance is expensive. Avoidance is how a small problem becomes a crisis, not because you're irresponsible, but because money is one of the only areas where we think not looking will somehow protect us, and it doesn't. It just delays the emotional cost. This weekly check-in is a quiet habit because it's not flashy, but it builds trust. It's you proving to yourself, over and over, I can face reality. And that matters more than people think, because security isn't just having money, it's having clarity. The third quiet habit is building what I call a shock absorber. Most people want an emergency fund because they've heard they should, but the emotional reason you need an emergency fund is that it stops life from becoming a trauma response. Because without a buffer, every unexpected expense becomes a threat, and threats trigger bad decisions. It's not hypothetical. By the way, the Federal Reserve has tracked how many adults say they could cover a $400 emergency expense with cash, savings, or a credit card paid off at the next statement. And it's not everyone. A meaningful chunk of people would have to borrow or sell something. So when I say shock absorber, I mean even a small buffer changes your nervous system. It turns a car repair from I'm doomed into okay, annoying, but handled. And that shift is massive. Because once you have even a little cushion, you stop making fear-based decisions. You stop paying for emergencies with high-interest debt, you stop scrambling, and you start choosing. Habit number 4 is one that sneaks up on people. Learning to recognize lifestyle inflation before it becomes your new baseline. This is where a raise comes in, and you think, finally, I can breathe. And for a moment, you'd though, and then your subscriptions grow, your meals out become normal, your car payment becomes manageable, your standards quietly rise. Not because you're bad with money, but because humans adapt. We normalize what used to feel like a luxury. That's part of what psychologists describe as hedonic adaptation, the tendency to get used to improvements. So they stop feeling as good over time. So the quiet habit here is deciding ahead of time what you'll do with extra money. Not all of it. You don't have to live like a monk, but some of it, because if you don't decide, your life will decide for you. And then you'll be back at the same emotional place, making more, but still feeling tight. The fifth quiet habit is honestly one of the most underrated financial skills. It's having a plan for fun money so you don't turn fun into self-sabotage. This is where a lot of people get stuck because they think security means restriction. So, they try to cut everything. They try to be perfect. And perfection lasts until you have a bad week. And then the backlash spending hits. You know the feeling. You've been good. You've been stressed. And then something inside you goes, I don't care. I just want relief. And money becomes emotional medicine. So secure people do something different. They don't eliminate pleasure. They budget for it emotionally. They give themselves a lane where spending is allowed, where it doesn't trigger guilt, because guilt creates rebellion, and rebellion is expensive. This isn't about being indulgent, it's about being realistic with your psychology, because if your plan doesn't include being human, it won't survive being human. There's one more habit I want to mention. The habit is choosing consistency over intensity. Most people try to build security with big musa, dramatic budget reset, a hardcore no-spend month, a sudden commitment to invest everything. And again, I respect the energy, but intensity is fragile. Consistency is quiet, boring, and unbelievably powerful. It's the same reason compound growth works in investing. The math is simple. Returns build on returns over time. But the emotional challenge is staying with the plan long enough for the math to matter. Security works like that too. A small automatic transfer every paycheck looks pointless at first, until one day it's not. Until one day you realize you have options, and that's when the whole story changes. Here's the turning point. The mindset shift that separates people who feel secure from people who always feel behind, even when they're doing okay. Security is not the absence of problems. Security is the presence of systems. It's waking up knowing that if life happens, if you get sick, if your car breaks, if work gets weird, you have a default response that doesn't involve panic. And that's why habits beat income. Income can rise and fall, but a system stays. And if you've never built a system, it makes sense that money feels unsafe, because you're relying on willpower and hope. Hope is not a strategy. A system is. And once you internalize that, you stop asking, how do I make more money so I can finally feel okay? And you start asking, what small default can I set up so future me isn't constantly cleaning up current mess? That question changes everything. Now, I want to give you practical takeaways. The first thing I'd do is create one automatic move that happens the day you get paid. Not 5 moves. Not a complete financial overhaul. Just one. Maybe it's $25 into a separate savings account. Maybe it's $50. Maybe it's 1% into a retirement plan if you have one. The amount matters less than the identity shift. I'm the kind of person who pays myself first. And if you want to make this even easier, make it a default. Behavioral research on automatic enrollment shows people stick with what's set up for them because inertia is powerful. Use that idea for yourself. Second, set a weekly money check-in that's so small you can't argue with it. 10 minutes. Same day every week. No judgment. Just awareness. Because awareness is the beginning of control, and control is the beginning of calm. Third, build a tiny shock absorber before you try to optimize everything. If you don't have an emergency fund, aiming for a first I can handle something amount is emotionally huge. Even $300 or $500 can change how you feel. It's not about the number being perfect, it's about breaking the pattern of every surprise becoming debt. And seeing that many people struggle with a $400 unexpected expense is not meant to scare you, it's meant to normalize that this is a structural common problem, not a personal defect. Fourth, when you get a raise or your income bumps up, pause. Just pause. Before your lifestyle expands to match it, decide what percentage of that raise goes to stability, even if it's small, because if you don't choose, hedonic adaptation will quietly eat it. And finally, give yourself guilt-free spending space, even if it's modest. Security isn't built by punishment, it's built by sustainability. If your plan makes you feel trapped, you will eventually escape it. So build a plan you can live inside. If you take anything from this, I hope it says this. Feeling secure with money is not reserved for people who figure it out early, or people who never mess up, or people who have a perfect salary. It's built by quiet habits that make your life less fragile. And you can start with one habit, one small default, one tiny system. Because when you do, something shifts. You stop feeling like money is this judgment hovering over your life, and it starts feeling like a tool you're learning to hold. Not perfectly, not all at once, but steadily. And that steadiness is what security actually is. So if you're watching this and you've been carrying that low-level anxiety, I see you. You're not behind in some moral sense. You're just living in a world where money is noisy and stressful. And nobody taught you how to build calm systems. But you can. And you don't have to do it with dramatic overhauls. You do it with quiet habits. And over time those habits don't just change your bank balance. They change how you sleep. They change how you breathe. They change how you show up in your life, because you're not constantly bracing for impact. Progress beats perfection. And if you can build one small habit this week, just one, future you is going to feel it. Not as a big celebration, but as something even better. Relief.